Disciples 2 is a fantasy turn-based strategy game. I started this beginner's guide because I find this game compelling, unique, and great fun, and I really wanted to share my knowledge so you can hopefully enjoy too. Let me know what you think, and be sure to like and comment if you'd like to see more guides like this in the future. I've also included some timestamps in the video so you can skip ahead if you have a specific section that you'd be more interested in. Let's start with setting up a new game. When you first launch the game, you'll see two different types of single-player game modes. You'll have quests and you'll have sagas. Quests are single missions in which you're tasked with a variety of objectives, but your progress doesn't carry over into the next one. Whereas a saga is more of a longer campaign in which your hero unit will carry over as well as some items and stuff. So some of your progression does carry over, and there's a bit more of an overarching storyline to the sagas as opposed to the quests. So there are 5 major factions to choose from. You've got the Empire, the Undead Hordes, the Elven Alliance, the Mountain Clans, and the Legions of the Damned. There are also several other neutral races, such as merfolk, bandits, greenskins, so like orcs, giants, and goblins, lizardmen, occultists, feral wolf packs, and many more. Along with a unique aesthetic for every faction, each also offers a pretty different playstyle. For example, the Empire specializes in healing friendly troops. The Undead Hordes paralyze their enemies into submission and feature units immune to weapon damage. The Elven Alliance has some fantastic ranged units, while also boasting some impressive healing units, and so are a pretty well-balanced faction overall. The Mountain Clans can buff the strength of other friendly units, and feature some of the toughest and strongest units in the game, but they generally attack last on a combat turn to compensate for their strengths. More on combat later. The Legions of the Damned have the most variety in terms of giant-type units, and rely heavily on fire attacks to defeat their foes. Try each faction out to see which one suits you the best. When you start a campaign, you get to choose one of 3 available classes. There's the Warrior, the Mage, or the Guildmaster. The Warrior starts with the Warlord Leader, grants all armies 15% health regeneration every turn, which is pretty cool, but as a drawback, spell research is limited to the 4th of 5 levels. The Mage starts with the Wizard Leader, and can cast spells twice in a single turn for half the cost. The Mage Tower building is also already built in your capital, and this building was required to research new spells, so pretty handy to have it built right off the bat. The Guildmaster starts with the Scout Leader, can upgrade towns for half the cost, and Thief units have the ability to carry out more types of spying assassination assignments. Additionally, the Guild building is already constructed in your capital city at the start of the game, which is required to recruit Thief units, so you can do that right off the bat too. Same as the Warrior though, spell research is limited to the 4th out of 5 levels for the Guildmaster. The difficulty levels range from very easy to very hard. On easier difficulties, the AI will be less aggressive, and enemy armies will begin the game with weaker, lower level units, but on higher difficulties, the AI will be much more aggressive, and enemy armies will begin the game with significantly stronger, higher level units. Let's move on to world map basics. The gameplay is divided into 3 main parts. Improving the capital city of your faction by constructing unique buildings to recruit units, upgrade them and research spells. Using leaders commanding small squads to explore the surroundings, procure resources, and complete a variety of objectives. And engaging enemies in turn-based combat. Every major faction starts a mission with a capital city, which is your seat of power on the level. From here you can hire leaders, recruit troops, and construct a variety of buildings. But unlike many other turn-based strategy games where there is a risk of losing your capital, and thus losing the game, in Disciples 2, each player's capital city is occupied by a powerful guardian unit who can't leave the capital, and whose sole purpose is to protect it. With that in mind, it's pretty unlikely that you'll ever lose your capital city, although it is possible. Very unlikely. There are 6 types of currency in Disciples 2. You have gold, which you use to construct buildings, buy upgrades for your cities, recruit new troops, bribe other players, and so on. Then there are the 5 types of mana, one representing each faction. You have life, death, grove, runestone, and infernal mana. Both gold and mana are generated at specific resource points on the map, and each resource point gives 50 of that specific resource when it's under a player's control. The supply is infinite, so you'll never actually deplete a gold or mana resource on the map. On top of any additional resource points they control, each faction gets 25 of their specific resource and earns 100 gold per turn. So even if you don't control any other resource points, you can still eventually raise an army. The world map begins by being almost totally covered in a fog of war, which disperses as you move your units around. When moving your parties around the map, colored flags represent the number of movement points required to move to a specific location. These are reduced at different rates depending on which type of terrain you're crossing. So for example, you'll travel a lot slower on water than you will through forests or along roads. Here's a quick breakdown of the effects of terrain on movement points. So movement on roads costs 1 point, movement on plains costs 2 points, movement on forests costs 4 points, and on water it costs a whopping 6 points. That said though, for leaders and armies with the flying attribute, movement only costs 2 points regardless of terrain, so flying is pretty useful. Blue flags indicate the range of movement of your leader this turn. White flags indicate the range of movement of your leader on subsequent turns, and there'll also be a little number next to the flag to tell you in how many turns your leader can reach this location. Red flags indicate that combat will be initiated if your leader moves to those areas. As you navigate the world map, you'll encounter many different types of units. Some will be hostile, a few will give you subquests which you can complete to gain prizes, should you wish to do so. Others will be territorial and will either attack you on sight or pursue you until you leave their area of the map. There are also a variety of other structures dotted about the world map, all of which can be explored and or conquered. You'll also find shops where you can buy and sell a variety of things like potions, special equipment, and other items. Armies on the world map are led by one of the creatures in them, and this creature represents the entire army's unit icon for simplicity. For example, a unit led by an orc will be depicted as an orc, but may have a total of up to 6 units in the party. You can right-click on an army to see its unit composition. If it's an enemy faction, you'll probably need to infiltrate it with a thief first before you can know what the enemy army is, whereas if it's a neutral faction, you should have access to its army composition right away. When you look at the map, you'll be able to see the terrain that belongs to your faction by looking at the ground color. At the start of each turn, each faction's terrain expands from every city in every direction, and each resource within your borders is under your control. There are 3 ways to spread terrain. You've got from your capital city, which is a relatively low spread, minor cities, which spread terrain pretty quickly, and you have special raws, which are very slow spreading and can only be planted by a special leader. When 2 opposing terrain types meet, the direction of the spread is determined by the number of the above 3 types of structures for each faction on a given landmass. So for example, if you're the Undead Hordes and you only have your capital city, and the Empire have a capital city and a minor city on the same continent, the Empire's terrain will eventually overwhelm your terrain. Now let's take a look at city management. Your capital city is where all buildings are constructed. Some buildings are required to train higher level units, while others serve other purposes. The Mage Tower is required in order for you to research spells, the Thieves Guild is required before you can recruit thieves or spy on other factions, and the Temple is required so that you can either heal or resurrect injured or dead creatures at cities rather than relying on potions. General rule, you can only research 1 spell and build 1 building per turn, with the exception of the Mage class, who can research 2 spells every turn. As you adventure through the world, you will also take over minor cities on the map. You can't construct buildings here, but with enough gold you can grow them into larger cities. There are 5 levels of growth, and these affect the number of characters that can be housed in a city, the rate at which your terrain spreads forth from the city, the speed with which your characters in the city recover their hit points, and the amount of armor your units get when they're garrisoned there. You can only grow each minor city once per turn, and the gold cost associated with growing the city increases every time. You can also store items in minor cities. On the party screen for a minor city, you will see 2 sections of troops. On the left is a list of troops with a leader stationed in the minor city, and to the right will be a list of troops without a leader, which are garrisoned in the city to defend it from attacks. Let's take a look at some army basics. Each unit on the map can comprise an army of up to 6 individual characters. If the leader of this army dies, the unit will still be able to move, but will do so at a much slower rate, and the unit's icon on the map will change. You'll see that the leader has died because of a little skull shield that will be displayed at the foot of the icon. Provided at least 1 character in the unit is still alive though, it's possible you can heal and resurrect those characters in the unit which have died. You can either do this via some magic spells, specific items like revive potions, or at any of the cities you control, provided you've constructed the temple in your capital city. There are 2 major categories of units which you can recruit for gold in cities. You have leaders and you have creatures. There are 5 types of party leaders. So first we have the fighter, which is a strong melee unit whose army regenerates 15% of their HP per day, regardless of your lord. Leadership, in other words, the allowed party size starts at 4, but can be leveled up to 6. It's a bit confusing because the leadership number is actually 1 less because it doesn't include the leader. So leadership of 3 means you can have 3 additional units in your party, and so on. Next we have the Mage, a ranged area of effect specialist. This leader can use staffs, orbs, and scrolls by default. Same as the Fighter, the allowed party size starts at 4, it can be leveled up to 6. Next we have the Scout, which is a movement specialist with more movement points than any other leader. This leader can use travel items like special boots by default. And same as the Fighter and Mage, the allowed party size starts at 4 but can be leveled up to 6. Next we have the Rod Planter, the only one which can plant rods, and whose main purpose is to capture important resources. The allowed party size can only include up to 2 units, including the Rod Planter, so you can only have the Rod Planter leader plus 1 unit to defend it. And lastly we have the Thief, a spy with a variety of sabotage options available, more if you chose the Guildmaster class at the start of the game. Their party size is limited to just the Thief themselves though, so they're on their own. A pretty unique mechanic in Disciples 2 is the leveling up of units within your army. What your creature becomes when it acquires enough experience and levels up will depend on the buildings you've constructed in your capital city. So for example, if you're playing as the Undead Hordes, your basic fighter unit can either level up into a zombie or a Templar, depending on the building you chose to build in your capital city. Both routes are mutually exclusive though, so this means you can't have some fighters become zombies and some fighters become Templars. You gotta pick one or the other, and that persists for the entire mission. Units on each upgrade path often have special attributes, which can make choosing between them a pretty difficult choice. So for example, the Zombie and all subsequent units down that upgrade path are immune to death attacks, while the Templar and all other units down that path block the first fire, air, water, or earth attack directed at them. It's called a ward in this game, so they resist basically the first fire, air, water, or earth attack and take no damage from it. They will take damage from subsequent attacks of this type though. Fortunately, once you've completed a mission, all the buildings in your capital city are wiped out. So on the start of the next level, you can change the upgrade path to better suit that specific mission. Now on to something you'll be doing quite a lot of in this game, combat. Combat is initiated by moving your army to a square adjacent to a rival or enemy unit on the map. Before you do that though, be sure to find out the unit composition of this army, just to know if you actually stand a chance of defeating it, or if you should back away and level up your troops a little bit before engaging them. You can right-click on a unit to view its composition. Depending on your in-game options, you might have to right-click and hold to view this panel. Units in neutral armies will always be visible, but you'll generally require a thief to infiltrate the armies of other major factions, so keep that in mind. Armies are organized into 2 rows of 3 tiles, front and back. Many units occupy 1 slot, but some powerful giant type units occupy 2. 3 basic unit types are available. We have melee, ranged, and area of effect, or AoE. Melee attacks can only reach adjacent tiles, and ranged or area of effect attacks are required to reach the back row until the front row has been completely cleared out. Right-clicking on a unit will display that unit's stats, including health, experience required to level up, armor, damage, attack type, chance to hit, initiative, range, and so on. Many of these stats can be buffed using potions or spells. Importantly, the initiative and damage values also have a hidden +0 to +5 random modifier that is calculated during each combat turn, and this presumably adds suspense in tense battles, so you never quite know the amount of damage that your units are going to do. The order in which characters attack in the combat screen is determined by their initiative stat. Higher initiative units attack first in a round, and lower initiative units attack later on. After all the units have acted, another round starts, and the units with the highest initiative goes first again, and so on until the battle is over. The excitement comes from the random damage and initiative rolls and the hit chance, so there's always the possibility of a surprise victory or defeat when a unit doesn't attack first, doesn't deal enough damage, or misses an attack. In combat, there are several different options available, including instant resolve, auto battle, retreat, defend, and wait. When retreating, all attacking units get a free hit on units that are running away. So just keep that in mind, but sometimes it can be useful to disengage to ensure your army at least survives another day. Setting a unit to defend reduces the incoming damage to that unit by 50%, but that unit cannot attack until the next combat round. Waiting can be useful if you want a unit to attack only at the end of a round. During combat, your leader can also use potions and certain items to summon additional friendly units, for example, which will use up their entire combat turn. Combat ends when an army successfully retreats, or when one army is completely wiped out. After a battle is won, the total experience is evenly distributed among your surviving units. If a unit gains enough experience points, and the prerequisite building has been constructed in your capital city, they will transform into a new unit. If they have already transformed into their strongest form for the mission, They'll gain small stat increases, and their icon will remain the same. So they'll look like the same unit, but they'll get a small stat increase. When a party leader levels up, they gain the ability to choose from a variety of new skills, including equipping new items, increasing their leadership skill so the party can include more units, becoming incorruptible to enemy thieves, increase their damage, armor, or health, gain additional movement points, and many, many more options. Now let's talk briefly about a more secondary aspect of Disciples 2, and that's diplomacy. It's less important, but it's still there, so it makes sense to talk about it. You play against other factions whose rulers can be spoken to and generally negotiated with. You can offer gold to another player, or offer to sell them a magic spell, or you can propose an alliance with them. You can even break an existing alliance with them and go to war if you really want to do that. As you attack another player's enemies, your popularity with that player will naturally increase, and over time other players may well offer you to ally with you. Alliances are not permanent though, so always make sure to watch your back for any backstabbing AI. When you're allied, you can't attack their troops or cities, or steal their resources unless the treaty is broken. You can break the treaty at any time, but while the treaty is in place, you should be reasonably safe. And that about wraps up this Disciples 2 Gold Edition Beginner's Guide. Hopefully you've found it useful. If you have, don't forget to like and comment on this video, letting me know what you thought, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. See you around.